Donald Trump is, unfortunately for him, back in the United States after a trip to Scotland that was supposed to be a personal business trip and golf vacation, but ended up being mostly about how he never had, in his words, the privilege of going to Jeffrey Epstein's private island. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. The first 6 months of Trump's presidency have not been great. He spent most of that time dismantling government services, slashing Medicaid, cutting taxes for the rich, snatching people off the streets, imposing arbitrary tariffs on American consumers, enriching himself financially, and tripping up the stairs like he's wearing rollerblades on linoleum. And yeah, I know that trip wasn't as bad as the time Biden tripped up the stairs, but you know it bothered Trump way more than it bothered Biden. When someone showed that clip to Trump, he probably threw a stapler at his head. But you know Biden was always showing it to people on his phone. He's like, yeah, oh, no joke, I almost ate it, yeah. Yeah, look at me, it's like I never walked before. Anyway, after that less than stellar record, you'd think Trump would get a bad grade for his first 6 months, but actually Republicans think he's crushing it.
6 months in,
Yes.
I mean, being very complimentary, what grade would you give Trump administration?
An A+ by far. You ever sit down and say, that one president accomplished a lot, but I didn't like his personality. No one ever studies that. They study what you're able to accomplish. He could have been everybody's friend, but nothing would have changed.
Yeah, he could have been everybody's friend, but he already had a best friend in Jeffrey Epstein. We all know. You don't need lots of friends if you got a really good one. So the GOP establishment gives Trump an A+ for his first 6 months, but actually voters are less impressed.
So the president says things are great. What do the voters say?
No, I think is the answer. Look, he started off back in January +6 points on the net approval rating, -3 in March, -7 in May, and now he's at a term too low at -11 points. His net approval rating has dropped nearly 20 points in the aggregate since the beginning of his presidency. The American people do not like what they're seeing.
All right, first of all, when did pollsters get so sassy? They used to be like old, serious guys, and now they have big 8th grader who carries a briefcase and calls the teacher Milady energy. I personally love this New York vibe. I mean, this guy's like a taxi driver from the Bronx. You want to see Trump's poll numbers? I'll give you Trump's poll numbers. -11, baby. -11, now get out of my way, I got places to be. But still, there has to be some good news for Trump in these polls, right?
I do have one piece of good news for Donald Trump, and that there is one other presidency that has a lower net approval rating at this point.
Okay, fine, well, thank you. Even the biased left-wing media has to admit that Donald Trump is not the most unpopular president in history. So who is it?
The bad news is that it was Donald Trump's other presidency, his first presidency, net approval rating 6 months in. The worst was in 2017. Donald Trump was 16 points underwater. The second worst, however, is this Donald Trump presidency, 11 points underwater.
Yeah, you know what? I got to give it up. Excellent troll. You know what I give that troll?
An A+ by far.
There you go. Once again, Trump makes history. He's somehow both more popular than he was the first time and also still the most unpopular president in history at the same time. He's both a doofus and like the Mr. Miyagi of politics. It's like during his first term, an advisor said, "This is going terribly," and he said, "Be patient, Danielson. The we are now, the better we will look the next time out." Still, bad is bad, and Trump's polling numbers are very bad. And if you break down the numbers by issue, the news gets even worse.
On what issues do the American voters seem to disapprove of him?
They disapprove of him on all of the issues. He's underwater on all the major issues of the day. Trump's net approval rating on all the major issues, -5 points on immigration, his best issue. He's underwater. How about the economy? That was what he was elected for. -14 points. How about foreign policy? -14 points. How about trade and those tariff wars? -15 points. And of course, the Epstein case, the lowest of the bunch, -37 points.
I mean, you know you're in the toilet when one of the issues they're polling about is your friendship with a sex trafficker. It's like that's what strongly disapprove was invented for. Tell me they didn't ask about the environment. No, it's worse, dude. We wish they asked about the environment. Trump's underwater on everything, immigration, the economy. If you look closely, he's even losing support among people who think windmills are killing the birds. But there's a lesson in these poll numbers for Democrats who think immigration is a good issue for Trump. I mean, look at this. It turns out people don't like it when masked federal agents rip families apart and kidnap people for the crime of being at Home Depot, when we all know being at Home Depot is the punishment. One time I was at Home Depot looking for a pressure-treated 2x4 and some quick-dry finish to fix part of my deck. So I went to the lumber section, and are you kidding me? I would not be caught dead doing something like that. You think I'm a do-it-yourselfer? If I buy so much as a jigsaw puzzle, I go right to Angie's List and find someone else to put it together. If a light bulb goes out in my apartment, I call my building super and I ask him to change it, and he always says the same thing.
No.
But by far the worst issue for Trump right now is the Epstein case. His numbers on the issue are terrible, and it's clearly freaking him out.
Politico reported Trump was furious and frustrated by the all-consuming Epstein coverage. Allies reportedly describing the mood inside the administration as, quote, haunted. One person saying, quote, it's the first time I've seen them sort of paralyzed. Trump losing the ability to dominate the narrative, as Politico puts it. A White House ally saying, quote, they're the ones that opened the can of worms on the Epstein conversation. No one made them do this, which makes it sting even worse.
Yeah, they did this to themselves. This is like if after Trump screamed, they're eating the dogs at a debate, Donald Trump started eating the dogs. And then reporters would say, during your campaign, you were anti-eating the dogs. What changed? And Trump would say, you're taking my comments out of context. I was mad because they weren't sharing. I was hungry, but I couldn't get any for myself because...
They're eating the dogs.
Another moment lost to history. They're eating the dogs, yelled the man who is now president. But what of the dogs? What of the people who ate the dogs? My friend, there is no time for your questions because I'm afraid we've moved on. And that's what Trump thought would happen with the Epstein issue, but it hasn't. People haven't moved on because Trump and his MAGA base spent years cynically hyping up the Epstein conspiracy. They thought only their political enemies would be harmed. But they either forgot or conveniently ignored the fact that Donald Trump was Epstein's best friend. It's like basing an entire political movement around your opposition to Bert and then voting for Ernie for president. And you're gonna tell me Bert isn't up to some shady He doesn't have an island, but that's not an innocent man's haircut. So the Epstein case is weighing Trump down. He tried to flee to Scotland to get away from it, but he was hounded by Epstein questions, even in places where he thought he could finally relax.
Are you enjoying the Scottish hospitality? Mr. Trump, can you escape the Jeffrey Epstein crisis?
Gotta love a question that answers itself. Mr. Trump, do you think everyone will forget about your decades-long friendship with a monster just because you're on a golf trip? Do you think people are that stupid? Also, I want to believe that when you go to Scottish journalism school, one of the classes is how to yell questions from the tall grass next to the golf course. All right, the first thing you need to do is blend in. So you gotta William Wallace your face, but you use green paint. That way they don't see you till you pop up with your question. Well, then it's too late, because you're there, it's too late. Even when Trump tries to change the subject, it falls flat, like when he met with the leader of the European Union to discuss a possible trade deal. I mean, surely all the questions were about tariffs, right?
Mr. President, was part of the rush to get this deal done to knock the Jeffrey Epstein story out?
Oh, you got to be kidding with that.
I've seen him look upset before, but I've never seen Trump look actually broken. You could just hear it in his voice. He sounds like he's been sitting at LaGuardia for 9 hours and his flight just got delayed a third time. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. I mean, I'm going back to Buffalo Wild Wings. Part of his problem is that he stirred up this controversy in the first place. Another part is how often his answers to the press deepen the controversy. Like when he brought up the incriminating birthday card he reportedly gave Epstein for Epstein's 50th birthday that said, "May every day be another wonderful secret," with the drawing of a naked woman. His explanation of that story just keeps making things worse.
I don't do drawings of women, that I can tell you. They say there's a drawing of a woman, and I don't do drawings of women.
Okay, so the way you keep saying you don't do drawings of women instead of you don't do drawings of people makes it sound like you do a ton of drawings of dudes. Are you like Jonah Hill in Superbad? Are you saying I don't draw women, but I do?
Draw pictures of
Then Trump dug the hole deeper by explaining that when he finally did cut ties with Epstein after a 15-year-long relationship in which he partied with Epstein, called him a terrific guy, and Epstein called Trump his closest friend. It wasn't because of Epstein's behavior. It was because Epstein poached Trump's employees.
For years, I wouldn't talk to Jeffrey Epstein. I wouldn't talk because he did something that was inappropriate. He hired help. And I said, don't ever do that again. He stole people that work for me. I said, don't ever do that again. He did it again. And I threw him out of the place, persona non grata.
That's not helping you, dude. Going out of your way to explain that you cut ties with a monster, not because he was a monster, but because he hired people away from you, just makes you sound even worse. That's like saying you stopped inviting Charles Manson to parties because he wouldn't use a coaster. But one thing you can't deny about Trump is that he has excellent political instincts, so he definitely pivoted away from that explanation, and I'm just kidding, he doubled down on his way back from Scotland.
Were some of the workers that were taken from you, were some of them young women?
Well, I don't want to say, but everyone knows the people that were taken. And it was the concept of taking people that work for me is bad. But that story's been pretty well out there. And the answer is yes, they were.
Yes, they were.
Yeah.
What did they do?
In the spa.
Jobs.
In the spa.
Yeah, it's people that work in the spa. I have a great spa, one of the best spas in the world at Mar-a-Lago. And people were taken out of the spa, hired by him. In other words, gone. And other people would come and complain, this guy is taking people from the spa. I didn't know that. And then when I heard about it, I told him, I said, listen, we don't want you taking our people, whether it was spa or not spa.
If this was a Law and Order episode, right about here is where Trump's attorney would turn to Jack McCoy and say, he doesn't say any more until we have a deal. The reporter asked about employees, and you brought up the spa all by yourself. I can't believe this guy somehow convinced people he's the voice of the common man, and yet he starts sentences, I don't have to tell you how hard it is to keep your spa staffed. That's the closest Trump gets to Shakespeare. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer or...
Whether it was spa or not spa.
Reporters tried to follow up and get clarity. They were basically begging him to say Epstein was a creep, but instead, Trump snapped at them.
We took people that worked for me, and I told him don't do it anymore, and he did it, and I said, stay the hell out of here.
What did they do? Go ahead.
So is that what was meant by being
Who are you with?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm the travel pool, but I'm with NBC News.
NBC fake news. Okay. NBC's one of the worst.
Buddy, you're the one who keeps digging a hole by saying you cut ties with Epstein not because of his sex trafficking, but because he stole people from your spa. Of course there are going to be follow-ups. I love he thinks his answers are going to put an end to things when they sound like a pitch for a horror movie. Look, it's simple, all right? See if you can follow. I have a spa, a beautiful spa. Sometimes a group of 4 goes into the steam room. Steam so thick they can't see each other. A little while later, only 3 come out. They can't find their friend. They go to the front desk. The woman who checked them in is gone. In her place is a talking skeleton. Does that answer all your questions? The reason why this controversy is hitting so close to home and rattling Trump's MAGA base is that they cast themselves as warriors against the elites, but it turns out they elected an elite who's covering up for other elites. They're going to have to change their slogan from Make America Great Again, or MAGA, to Sex Predators of America, or...
Spa.
Spa. Yeah, that's what it is. Spa. Spa. I see what you did, Sally! Spa. This has been A Closer Look.